Hi guys, it's Daryl and welcome back to Hypeword. Today I'm going to be looking at a few books that fans of other genres might want to check out when they're looking to read science fiction. So a lot of people that read other genres kind of might have a bit of a misconception about science fiction. They might think it's all about space battles or aliens or robots. And while you do get a lot of science fiction about these concepts or ideas, there is a lot more to it. And also I think it can be intimidating sometimes, especially when you think that you're going to pick up a science fiction book and you won't know the terminology, or it's going to be full of stuff that is just completely over your head. So I wanted to put a list of books together for people that might want to dip their toe into science fiction but don't know where to start. So for the first book on my list is for fans of epic fantasy. And the book I've chosen for fans of epic fantasy is Dune by Frank Herbert. Set in the distant future amid a feudal interstellar society in which noble houses in control of individual planets owe allegiance to the Padishah Emperor. Dune tells the story of young Paul Atreides, whose noble family accepts the stewardship of the desert planet Arrakis, home to the only source of the spice melange, the most important and valuable substance in the universe. Because of this, control of Arrakis is coveted and dangerous undertaking. The story explores the multi-layered interaction of politics, religion, ecology, technology and human emotion as the factions of the Empire confront each other in a struggle for the control of Arrakis and its spice. Dune is a great transition novel for fans of fantasy to move into science fiction because it follows a similar trope to a lot of fantasy novels, a lot of epic fantasy novels. We have the protagonist, Paul, who is taken from everything he knows and he embarks upon an adventure on a new planet that is completely alien to him. We also have the mysticism around the Bene Gesserit, an order to which Paul's mother belongs. The Bene Gesserit are a key social, religious and political force in the book, whose motives are steeped in prophecy and mystery. Herbert himself purposefully fashioned Dune to be what you might call soft sci-fi, in that it doesn't go into a great detail regarding technology in this distant future society. Even back when it was published, science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke described it as unique, and he claimed, "I know nothing comparable to it except Lord of the Rings." So if you're new to science fiction but you're a fan of epic fantasy, then this one could be for you. If you enjoyed Dune, you could follow it up with something like Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, which is another great transition novel for fans of fantasy to transition into science fiction. So the next book I have is for fans of young adult, and I've chosen Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Spencer's world has been under attack for hundreds of years. An alien race called the Krell leads onslaught after onslaught from the sky in a never-ending campaign to destroy humankind. Humanity's only defense is to take to their ships and fight the enemy in the skies. Pilots have become the heroes of what's left of the human race. Spencer has always dreamed of being one of them, of soaring above the planet and proving her bravery. But her fate is intertwined with her father's, a pilot who was killed years ago when he abruptly deserted his team, placing Spencer's chances of attending flight school somewhere between slim and none. No one will let Spencer forget what her father did, but she is still determined to fly, and the Krell just made that a possibility. They've doubled their fleet, making Spencer's world twice as dangerous, but their desperation to survive might take her skyward. So although this has been published as an adult work of science fiction, for me it felt very young adult in terms of its tone. It has many traits that are traditionally YA. Firstly, Spencer is a teenager, and she starts off in the book very quite young, younger than I was expecting, to be honest. And although there is a growth arc for the character, for me she never really enters full adult maturity, so to speak, at least in this book, the first in the series. Although the books deal with adult subject matter such as death and loss, these are presented through a sort of YA filter and also countered with comic relief and sassy characters, which makes the tone of the book quite light. As with lots of great YA books, Spencer is coming of age and realising who she is, which makes this a great sci-fi to start with if you're a fan of YA. You could potentially follow this up by reading Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, where you can enter a world with freakishly genius children who are trained to battle an alien race that is threatening mankind. So the next book I have is for fans of contemporary fiction, and for this I've chosen Machines Like Me, and this is by Ian McEwan. Machines Like Me occurs in an alternative 1980s London. Charlie, drifting through life and dodging full-time employment, is in love with Miranda, a bright student who lives with a terrible secret. When Charlie comes into money, he buys Adam, one of the first batch of synthetic humans. With Miranda's assistance, he co-designs Adam's personality. This near-perfect human is beautiful, strong and clever. A love triangle soon forms. These three beings will confront a profound moral dilemma. Ian McEwan's Machines Like Me sets out to pose fundamental questions. What makes us human? Our outward deeds or our inner lives? Could a machine understand the human heart? It also sets out to warn of the power to invent things beyond our control. This book will appeal to fans of contemporary fiction in a number of ways. Firstly, the story centres around an AI, but the AI itself is rather secondary to the story. The main bulk focuses on the other characters, Charlie and Miranda, and how the AI has entered their lives and how it affects them. Again, even though this book is set in an alternate reality, with the point of divergence being that Alan Turing didn't die, as he did in this reality, this is only a backdrop to what is the main story. Basically, the characters, Charlie and Miranda, their relationship, and how they interact with this artificial intelligence. In Machines Like Me, you won't find killer robots, explosions, or car crashes. It's all very understated, so much so that it kind of feels like a story about people living in this reality, and there just happens to be an artificial intelligence hanging around in the kitchen. Machines Like Me sets out to take a cross-section of what it means to be human, rather than sets out to be a piece of science fiction literature. At least that's how I interpreted it. You could follow this up with something like I, Robot by Isaac Asimov. So the next book I have is for fans of classical fiction, and for this I have chosen The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. A groundbreaking work of science fiction, The Left Hand of Darkness tells the story of a lone human emissary to Winter, an alien world whose inhabitants can choose and change their gender. His goal is to facilitate Winter's inclusion in a growing intergalactic civilization, but to do so he must bridge the gulf between his own views and those of the completely dissimilar culture that he encounters. Embracing the aspects of psychology, society and human emotion on an alien world, The Left Hand of Darkness stands as a landmark achievement in the annals of intellectual science fiction. So The Left Hand of Darkness will appeal to fans of classical fiction for a number of reasons. Firstly, it was written in the 60s, and the style in which it was written, although not classical in a sense, is quite formal. So this might resonate with fans of classical fiction. It's also considered a classic in the genre of science fiction. Not only that, it's also considered a masterwork of science fiction literature. As well as dealing with politics, it also has many themes on the emotional spectrum and was considered very much ahead of its time, so much so that it still feels fresh today. I would say The Left Hand of Darkness, rather than being hard science fiction, is more an emotional journey with a science fiction setting, and although deals with aliens, it does so in a way that's both relatable to everyone while being brave and forward-thinking at the same time. The Left Hand of Darkness is one that I specifically would recommend to anybody, and you could follow this up with another sci-fi classic, something like Flowers for Algernon, to continue the journey through science fiction classics with very human-led stories. So the next book I have on my list is for fans of thrillers, and for this one I have chosen Under the Skin by Michael Faber. Set in northern Scotland, Under the Skin traces an alien extraterrestrial who, manifesting in human form, drives around the Scottish countryside picking up male hitchhikers whom she drugs and delivers to her own planet. The protagonist is Isley, an extraterrestrial sent to Earth by a rich corporation on her planet to kidnap unwary hitchhikers. She drugs them and delivers them to her compatriots, who mutilate and fatten her victims so they can be turned into meat. Under the Skin takes us on what has been described as a heart-thumping ride through dangerous territory, our own moral instincts and the boundaries of compassion. So I chose this book as appealing to fans of thrillers for a number of reasons. One of those being that it's a very intense read, much in the way thrillers are. It's also a very strange read, sometimes grotesque and sometimes very violent. Like many thrillers, Under the Skin has an ability to pull the reader through the entire novel by laying breadcrumbs to the motives of Iseult and her species. And while our protagonist doesn't necessarily act on what we might deem the side of right, Faber presents her in a way that we want to know more about her, and to a certain degree we also end up rooting for her. Under the Skin, like many thrillers, will stay with you for a long time after reading, and you could follow this up with something like Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, a thriller about a man who wakes up to find the life he remembers no longer exists. So the next book I have is for fans of gaming, and for this one I've chosen Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. It's the year 2044 and the real world has become an ugly place. We're out of oil, we've wrecked the climate, famine, poverty and disease are widespread. Like most of humanity, Wade Watts escapes this depressing reality by spending his waking hours jacked into the Oasis, a sprawling virtual utopia where you can be anything you want to be, where you can live and play and fall in love on any of 10,000 planets. And like most of humanity, Wade is obsessed by the ultimate lottery ticket that lies concealed within his alternate reality. Oasis founder James Halliday, who dies with no heir, has promised that control of Oasis and his massive fortune will go to the person who can solve the riddles he has left scattered through his creation. So this will appeal to gamers for various reasons, one of those being it takes gaming to the next immersive level. While this book is fun for the most part and generally light in its tone, it also touches on a few important themes, one of those being a look at the disparity between how someone presents themselves online and the reality of their real life situation, something we're seeing an increasing awareness of. While in my opinion the writing in Ready Player One is the thing that lets the book down the most, it's a solid story that will appeal to gamers, fans of 80s nostalgia, and it's a great introduction to the genre of cyberpunk. You could follow this up with something like Neuromancer by William Gibson, a book that some would consider to be the apex of the cyberpunk genre. So the next book I've chosen is for fans of horror fiction, and for this I've chosen I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. Robert Neville is the last living man on Earth, but he's not alone. Every other man, woman and child on the planet has become a vampire, and they are hungry for Neville's blood. By day he is a hunter, stalking the undead through the ruins of civilization. By night he barricades himself into his home and prays for the dawn. After bouts of depression and alcoholism, Neville finally determines there must be some scientific reason behind the vampire's origins, behaviours and aversions. So he sets out to investigate. So this will appeal to fans of horror fiction because it takes the beloved trope of vampires and puts it in a post-apocalyptic setting. International Writers magazine said, despite having vampires in it, I Am Legend is not a novel on vampires, nor even a horror nor sci-fi novel at all, in the deepest sense. Instead, it's perhaps the greatest novel written on human loneliness. You could follow this up with something like The Girl with All the Gifts by Emma Carey to continue a journey through post-apocalyptic horror/science fiction. So that's the end of my list and the end of this video. Thanks so much for watching. Please give the video a like if you like the content, and also subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos from me. We talk about science fiction, fantasy and sometimes horror here, so if that is your thing, please stick around. Until next time guys, happy reading.